There are stories that echo through time, not because they're loud, but because they're real. Stories that whisper our own doubts, reflect our silent dreams, and remind us of what it means to hope. This is one of those stories. Maria's journey didn't begin with opportunity or wealth. It began in a tiny village in southern Honduras, where cracked earth met the sky, and survival was a daily victory. With no running water, no stable electricity, and no promises from the future, Maria woke up each day to the sound of her mother grinding corn by hand, an ancient rhythm passed down like a quiet prayer. Her father worked the fields, earning cents, not dollars. Yet, in the heart of that silence, Maria dared to dream. Not loudly, not confidently, but deeply. And that dream would one day carry her thousands of miles north, into a country she had only seen in magazine pages, America. Maria's childhood was stitched together with resilience. She sold empanadas on the dusty roadside after school, her schoolbooks wrapped in plastic to shield them from the afternoon rain. Education wasn't a given where she lived, it was a luxury. Still, she sat under mango trees at night, studying, by candlelight, reading English words out loud, even though she didn't yet understand them. One day, she whispered to herself, "I'll go there. I'll be someone." But life, as it often does, didn't wait for her dreams to catch up. At just 14, she lost her mother to a sudden illness. There was no hospital nearby, no doctor to explain what went wrong. Only silence, only grief. Maria's world crumbled, but she didn't. Instead, she took on her mother's chores, raised her younger siblings, and worked twice as hard. That flame of hope, it didn't go out, it burned hotter. Years passed. The world around her stayed the same, but Maria changed. By 19, she had saved enough money, not for comfort, but for escape. Crossing the border was never a fantasy, it was a desperate leap of faith. With nothing but a backpack, a half-full water bottle, and a photo of her family, Maria joined a group headed north. She walked for days under blistering sun, slept in the open, and hid from those who might send her back. Her feet bled, her spirit nearly broke, but she kept moving. Not because she was brave, but because she couldn't afford to stop. Each step was a sacrifice, each mile a goodbye to the life she once knew. When she finally reached the US border, exhausted and trembling, she wasn't welcomed with open arms, but with handcuffs and cold steel bars. And still, she didn't cry. Detained for weeks, Maria barely spoke. She didn't have the words, and even if she did, no one seemed to listen. But silence doesn't mean surrender. It means waiting, watching, enduring. Eventually, she was released into the custody of a distant cousin in Los Angeles, a woman she'd never met in person, only through shaky long-distance phone calls. Life in America wasn't what the magazines promised. It was cramped apartments, 3 jobs, and constant fear of being sent back. But it was also the first time Maria saw lights that stayed on through the night. The first time she owned a pair of new shoes. The first time she dared to write her name on a job application. Her English was broken, her accent thick, but her will was unshakable. Every no became fuel. Every closed door, a challenge. Maria hadn't come this far to give up now, and so began the slow transformation. A GED came first, earned during midnight study sessions after 10-hour cleaning shifts. Then came night classes at the local community college, where she sat beside teenagers half her age and immigrants who carried their own heavy stories. She studied nursing, drawn by memories of the mother she couldn't save. There were days she couldn't afford bus fare, days she went without eating, and nights she sobbed quietly into her pillow. But she kept going. Because Maria wasn't just chasing the American dream. She was redefining it, not as fame or fortune, but as dignity, as freedom, as a future where a girl born in a forgotten village could stand tall in a hospital corridor, wearing scrubs and a name tag that read, simply, Maria. Maria's journey through college was anything but ordinary. Her days began before dawn and ended long after the city had gone to sleep. At 5 in the morning, she would catch the first bus to her job at a downtown hotel, where she scrubbed floors and cleaned rooms for minimum wage. By noon, she was in class, sitting in the back, tired but alert, scribbling notes in a language she was still mastering. Most of her classmates didn't know her name. To them, she was quiet, polite, invisible. But what they couldn't see was the storm inside her. Every lecture, every textbook, every test, each one was a silent rebellion against the fate she was told to accept. She had crossed deserts and borders. She wasn't about to be defeated by chemistry or anatomy. On weekends, Maria worked double shifts at a local diner, balancing trays, memorizing orders, and dealing with impatient customers who often mistook her accent for ignorance. But even when the tips were low and the hours long, she carried herself with quiet pride. Each dollar she saved brought her closer to independence. She sent part of her earnings back to Honduras, where her siblings were still fighting their own battles. Every wire transfer was a message. I'm still here. I haven't forgotten. And yet, despite all her sacrifices, loneliness clung to her like a shadow. She missed her mother's voice, the laughter of her sisters, the smell of fresh tortillas in the morning. In America, everything moved fast. People chased success like it was air. But for Maria, just surviving felt like a full-time job. After 3 years of relentless work, Maria earned her associate degree in nursing. There was no ceremony, no cap and gown, no cheering crowd. Just a printed certificate and a deep, aching sense of pride. She had made it. She had done what many said she couldn't. But she was not done yet. Determined to go further, she applied for a work permit, and after a long and complicated process, was finally granted legal status under the DREAM Act. It was a turning point. For the first time, she felt seen, not just as a worker, but as a person with a future. With her new documentation, she applied for jobs at local clinics, eventually landing a position as a nurse assistant at a small community health center that served immigrants and low-income families. There, she found purpose. At the clinic, Maria saw reflections of her past in every patient she met. Mothers with tired eyes, fathers with calloused hands, children coughing from untreated infections. These weren't just strangers. They were echoes of the life she had lived. Her empathy wasn't learned in books. It came from experience. She listened without judgment, offered comfort without condition. The doctors admired her work ethic. The patients trusted her warmth. And slowly, she began to feel something she hadn't felt in years: belonging. It was in the simple things, a smile from a child, a thank you whispered in Spanish, that Maria found strength. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was healing. Not just others, but herself. During this time, Maria began to speak out. She joined local immigrant advocacy groups, sharing her story at small events and community meetings. Public speaking terrified her, but she did it anyway. "If I don't tell my story," she once said, "who will?" Her words carried weight, not because they were perfectly delivered, but because they were true. People listened, some cried, others thanked her for giving voice to what they couldn't say. Maria didn't see herself as a hero, just someone who got tired of being afraid. Her courage inspired others to believe they too could rise from the margins. Her past, once a source of shame, had become her most powerful tool. And then, life brought an unexpected light. His name was Daniel. He was a second-generation Mexican-American working as a social worker at the same clinic. Their first conversation was brief, just a comment about a malfunctioning coffee machine. But over time, those moments became longer, deeper. Daniel saw Maria not as a tragic figure or a symbol of struggle, but as a woman of resilience and fire. He asked about her story. He listened, truly listened. With him, Maria found comfort, laughter, and something she hadn't dared to imagine: love. They shared long talks about justice, culture, dreams. He reminded her that it was okay to rest, to breathe, to be happy. That joy wasn't something she had to earn through pain. Their relationship grew quietly, rooted in respect and mutual understanding. But even love, for someone like Maria, came with complications. Trust wasn't easy after years of surviving on her own. Letting someone in felt like exposing an old wound. But Daniel was patient. He never pushed, never demanded. He simply stood by her side, even when she tried to push him away. With time, Maria began to trust the future, not just as an idea, but as a place she was allowed to belong. They moved in together into a modest apartment filled with second-hand furniture and sunlight. It wasn't glamorous, but it was home. For the first time in years, Maria had space to just be, to grow, to rest, to dream bigger. Inspired by Daniel and the stories of her patients, Maria decided to continue her education. She applied for a bachelor's program in nursing, aiming not just to work at the clinic, but to help run it one day. She envisioned a place where no one would be turned away, where language wasn't a barrier, and where care came with dignity. The application process was grueling, and doubts crept in. Could she really do this? Was she enough? But each time fear tried to take hold, she remembered the girl who crossed the desert with nothing but a backpack and a dream. That girl had survived worse. That girl had earned this chance. Maria was accepted into the program and began the next chapter of her transformation. University life brought new challenges. She was older than most of her peers, carried more responsibility, and had less time. But Maria thrived. She formed study groups, mentored younger students, and even started a bilingual health outreach program to help immigrants access medical services. Her professors noticed her leadership and depth. She was no longer the invisible student in the back of the class. She was the one others turned to for guidance, for clarity, for strength. And through it all, she stayed grounded. Every morning before class, she'd text her siblings. Every weekend, she'd call home. Honduras was far away, but never forgotten. Her roots weren't chains, they were anchors. As Maria's final year approached, the pressure mounted, balancing classes, clinical rotations, part-time shifts at the clinic, and her responsibilities at home with Daniel left her physically and emotionally drained. There were nights when exhaustion hit so hard she cried silently into her textbooks, unsure how she would make it through another week. But Maria had learned long ago that resilience isn't loud. It's quiet, persistent, and forged in the fire of necessity. What kept her going wasn't ambition alone, it was memory. She remembered the face of her mother on her last day, her father's calloused hands waving goodbye, her younger brother's tearful voice asking, "Will you come back someday?" Those memories weren't burdens, they were fuel. Every sleepless night was a tribute to the sacrifices of the people who loved her first. It was also during this time that tragedy struck again. Maria received a call from her sister in Honduras. Their father had fallen ill. The news shattered her. He was the last thread to the life she had left behind, and now he was slipping away. Maria wanted nothing more than to return home, but she couldn't. Not legally, not without risking everything she had built. So, she sent money, arranged medical support remotely, and called every night to speak to him through the crackling phone line. "Estoy orgulloso de ti," he told her in a frail voice. "I'm proud of you." It was the last thing he ever said to her. He died a week later. Maria mourned in silence. No funeral, no goodbye. Just grief tucked away between her responsibilities and obligations. She cried at the bus stop. She cried in the clinic restroom, but she kept going. Daniel became her anchor during this time. He held her through the quiet sobs, made her tea when she couldn't eat, sat with her in silence when words failed. He didn't try to fix the pain, just carried it with her. That shared grief deepened their bond in ways neither of them had expected, and slowly, Maria returned to herself, not the same, but stronger, in new, unexpected ways. Her grief became part of her story, a deeper layer in the mosaic of her identity. She spoke of her father now when encouraging patients to seek care early, reminding them how preventable loss often is. His death, though distant, became a part of her mission. Her work gained new urgency. It wasn't just about helping, it was about honoring. Graduation came on a warm spring afternoon. This time, Maria allowed herself the ceremony. She walked across the stage in a borrowed gown, tears in her eyes as her name was called. Not just Maria, but Maria Reyes, Bachelor of Science in Nursing. Daniel clapped so hard his hands turned red. Her professors stood to applaud, and in the crowd were faces she didn't expect. Her sister, flown in from Honduras with the help of the local immigrant community, and two of her childhood friends from the village. Maria froze when she saw them. It felt like two worlds colliding. Her, past and her present, in the same space, witnessing her rise. She hugged them tightly, crying without shame. That moment wasn't just hers. It belonged to every girl who ever dreamed of something more while sitting barefoot in the dirt. With her degree in hand, Maria was offered a full-time nursing position at the clinic, now expanded and better funded, thanks in part to the advocacy work she and Daniel had helped lead. She began overseeing health outreach programs, mentoring new nurses, and shaping policies that gave priority to underserved communities. Her story, once whispered in quiet corners, was now being shared on public stages. She gave talks at universities, participated in healthcare panels, and was even invited to Washington, D.C. to speak on immigrant health equity. But despite the growing recognition, she never lost sight of her purpose. She wasn't interested in fame, only in impact. Maria still walked the halls of the clinic every morning, greeting patients by name, holding hands, listening, caring. Her journey from the dry roads of Honduras to the heart of American healthcare was never about becoming rich. It was about becoming whole. Maria had once crossed a desert with nothing but a photo and a dream. Now she stood tall, not as a victim, not as a miracle, but as a woman who refused to be erased. Her story is a reminder that the American dream is not about perfection. It's about perseverance. It's about daring to believe in something better, even when the world tells you to sit still. And for Maria, that belief changed everything. It gave her a voice. It gave her a future. It gave her a life. But her journey isn't over. In fact, it's only beginning. With her new role at the clinic and her story resonating across communities, Maria found herself stepping into a different kind of responsibility. She was no longer just the immigrant girl trying to survive. She had become a symbol of what was possible. But with that visibility came pressure. Invitations to conferences, media interviews, and non-profit boards began to pour in. She was grateful, yes, but also wary. Success had taught her that visibility could be a double-edged sword. People loved a story with a clean arc, but Maria's life remained beautifully complicated. She still woke up at 5 a.m. to call Honduras and check in on Val. Her siblings. She still navigated the fine print of immigration policies that threatened the stability she'd worked so hard to build. And she still wrestled with guilt. Guilt for being here when so many others were still fighting to arrive. But Maria didn't run from these complexities. She embraced them. She began mentoring young immigrant women in the community, creating a support group called Raíces Fuertes, Strong Roots. The group met weekly in a church basement and quickly grew from 5 members to dozens. Some were undocumented, others were DACA recipients, and all were navigating the tension between survival and self-realization. Maria listened more than she spoke. She didn't have all the answers, but she offered what few people had given her, a safe space to be seen. The stories she heard of abuse, fear, hunger, and hope reminded her of her own journey. Together, they found healing not by pretending their pain didn't exist, but by turning it into power. As her community impact deepened, Maria was approached by a local university with a proposition. They wanted her to co-lead a new initiative focused on culturally competent healthcare training. The offer came with a faculty title, funding, and creative freedom. At first, she hesitated. She had never seen herself as an academic. Her education had always been a means to survive, not a place to lead from. But Daniel encouraged her to see the opportunity for what it was. Not just a job, but a platform to shape the future of medicine for people like her. After weeks of reflection, Maria accepted. She began developing workshops that addressed the real-life barriers immigrants face in accessing care. Her sessions were raw, honest, and often emotional. Students left not just more informed, but transformed. Meanwhile, her relationship with Daniel continued to evolve. Their connection had been forged in fire, trials, grief, shared purpose. But now it was growing in sunlight. They took time to enjoy the small things, weekend hikes, cooking meals together, learning each other's childhood songs. For the first time, Maria let herself imagine the possibility of family, her own. The idea terrified her. What kind of mother could she be, shaped by so much struggle? But Daniel never pressured her. He simply held space for the dream to take shape naturally. And one morning, over coffee and quiet conversation, they made the decision together. They were ready. 9 months later, Maria held her newborn daughter in her arms, eyes wide, cheeks soft, her tiny hand gripping Maria's, finger like it was the only thing she'd ever trust. Motherhood changed everything again. The strength Maria had drawn from loss was now fueled by love. She saw the world with new urgency. Every system, every policy, every injustice became personal. What kind of future would her daughter inherit? The question haunted her. So Maria didn't slow down, she adapted. She carried her daughter to community meetings, wore her in a sling during lectures, nursed her between shifts. Some criticized her. "You're doing too much," they said. "Take a break." But Maria knew something they didn't. Her daughter wasn't a distraction. She was the mission. Every time she looked into her eyes, she saw the reason she'd crossed borders, buried grief, fought battles. This wasn't about climbing ladders. It was about building bridges. As her daughter grew, so did Maria's influence. Her name appeared on community awards, healthcare articles, and even national advocacy campaigns. But for Maria, legacy wasn't measured in headlines. It was measured in change. One of her most meaningful moments came when a former patient, now a nursing student, approached her after a workshop and said, "I'm here because you were there." It was then that Maria realized her story had become a seed, planted in others, growing far beyond her own reach. She didn't need to be everywhere. She just needed to keep showing up, one person at a time. And that's exactly what she did. Maria's daughter, named Esperanza, Hope, was now walking and speaking her first words. Watching her explore the world, fearless and free, Maria couldn't help but reflect on her own childhood, on what had been missing, stolen, or lost. But instead of bitterness, she felt something else: responsibility. She and Daniel created a home filled with love, books, culture, and language. They spoke both Spanish and English to Esperanza, grounding her in dual identities, so she could feel whole, not torn. At night, Maria would sing lullabies from her village, soft and ancient, and tell stories of the land they came from. Esperanza would listen, wide-eyed, and drift into sleep cradled in roots deeper than she yet knew. But even with personal joy, Maria never forgot where she came from. She continued to advocate for immigration reform, organizing town halls and testifying before local government panels. She was no longer just telling her story. She was helping shape policy. One day, she received a call from a national nonprofit asking her to sit on their board. It was a position that came with influence and pressure, but also with an opportunity to make systemic change. Maria said yes, not for herself, but for the undocumented teen working double shifts just to pay tuition, for the mother walking miles to reach a free clinic, for every forgotten voice buried under red tape. She remembered them all, because she had once been them. Then came an unexpected invitation, one that would change everything again. Maria was nominated for a National Humanitarian Award, recognizing her contributions to healthcare equity and immigrant advocacy. The ceremony was to be televised, with attendees from across the country. At first, she laughed at the idea. Me? That girl who crossed the desert? But Daniel looked at her with pride and said, "You're not just the girl who crossed, you're the woman who built the road." And so, she went. Standing in front of cameras, lights, and a sea of strangers, Maria accepted the award. Not with grandeur, but with grace. Her speech was simple, direct, and unforgettable. The American dream isn't about where you arrive. It's about who you bring with you. The award brought new attention, and with it, new opportunities and scrutiny. Media outlets reached out, wanting to tell her story. Some wanted to sensationalize it, turning her life into a neat arc of tragedy to triumph. But Maria insisted on authenticity. She told them about the nights she went hungry, the detention center, the funeral she missed. She spoke of her fears, of moments when she nearly gave up, because the truth mattered, not just the highlights, but the cost. She wanted the world to understand that her success wasn't exceptional, it was possible, and it should be more common. Her story wasn't about beating the odds, it was about changing them. Back at home, Maria remained grounded. She still volunteered on weekends, still answered calls from the clinic, still visited Raíces Fuertes. She began writing a book, not a memoir, but a guide for young immigrants navigating education and healthcare in a country that often seems stacked against them. She included templates for applications, advice for dealing with fear, encouragement for dreaming big, even when the world feels small. It was practical, honest, and filled with the voice she never had growing up. The book spread organically, first in schools, then in shelters, then across borders. Letters began arriving from girls in Mexico, El Salvador, Guatemala. "Your words gave me courage." Maria cried every time. Despite all she had achieved, Maria knew there was still more to do, more battles to fight, more lives to touch. The American dream, she realized, wasn't something you arrive at and claim, it's something you pay forward. She had received help along the way, a cousin's kindness, a professor's faith, a community's embrace. Now it was her turn to lift others. And so she kept going. One workshop, one story, one hand held at a time. Her journey hadn't ended at the border. It hadn't ended with a degree, or an award, or even a child. It kept unfolding, day by day, breath by breath, step by step. Years passed. Esperanza grew older and Maria grew wiser. Her hair showed threads of silver now, but her fire had not dimmed. If anything, it had matured, deeper, steadier. Her clinic expanded to serve more families. Her advocacy helped pass 2 local healthcare access bills, and her book was now used in university classrooms. One evening, sitting on her porch, Maria watched her daughter read aloud in both Spanish and English. In that moment, everything came full circle. The barefoot girl under the mango tree had become a woman who had rewritten not just her story, but the legacy of everyone who would follow her. And yet, Maria didn't think of herself as extraordinary. She always said she was just one of many. One, light among millions, trying to shine despite the darkness. But what set her apart was that she never let the darkness define her. She let it shape her, challenge her, teach her, but not silence her. Her voice, once so timid, had become a lifeline for others. Her journey, once so fragile, had become a roadmap. And though the path had been brutal, she would walk it all over again, because every mile, every scar, every tear had meaning. In the end, Maria's story is not just about an immigrant's rise or a woman's triumph. It's about the unshakable human spirit, about what it means to love, to lose, to dream, and to build, about the quiet courage of those who refuse to be forgotten. And it's a reminder that sometimes the most powerful thing we can do is simply to keep going. From nothing to the American dream, Maria's journey wasn't heart-shattering because of its pain. It was because of its beauty. And that beauty lives on, in her daughter, in her patience, in every life she's touched, and maybe in yours too. If Maria's journey moved you, imagine how many others need to hear it too. Leave a comment and tell us what part of her story touched you the most. Like this video to help it reach more people. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that hope is still real. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more true stories that inspire, empower, and heal. Your support helps us keep telling voices that matter.